Did you ever really listen to what the Pokédex was telling us? Not just the type matchups or the height and weight. I mean the stories, the quiet cries between the lines. Because buried beneath the cheerful text and pixelated charm, there was always something unsettling. Something we didn't question, because we were too busy having fun. Back then, it was all about catching them all, battling on school trips, swapping cards at lunch. We weren't thinking about what it meant to trap wild, intelligent creatures inside tiny balls, or to command them to fight until they fainted. That world felt magical, safe, simple. But the older we get, the more we start to notice the cracks. The way some Pokédex entries don't make sense until you read them twice. The way some Pokémon aren't just mysterious, but tragic. Or worse, terrifying, and that's what this series is about. The hidden darkness inside the Pokémon world. A world we thought we knew. Before we go deeper, I just want to say thank you. For watching, for listening, for growing up with Pokémon and still carrying that wonder with you. If stories like this make you think, or feel, consider leaving a like or subscribing. And drop a comment with your city and what time it is where you are. I love seeing how this little nostalgic journey connects people across the globe. Alright, let's dim the lights, because to understand how deep this goes, we need to go back to Pallet Town, to Route 1, to the first time we flipped through the Pokédex, thinking it was just flavor text. But the Pokédex was never just a guide, it was a warning, a soft, persistent voice telling us that all was not right in this world. Take Parasect. On the surface, a big bug with a mushroom, but dig into the entries, and you learn it's been completely taken over, its mind consumed, its body hijacked. The creature we see moving around isn't even alive in the traditional sense. It's the fungus. The insect is gone. A husk. Then there's Cubone, forever mourning a lost mother, wearing her skull like a mask, crying to the moon. Do we even stop to ask what kind of world creates a child like that? Or Yamask, doomed to carry a mask of its human face, not just ghost, but a soul in torment. These aren't just spooky trivia points. They paint a picture, a world of grief, of manipulation, of Pokémon driven to madness from isolation, of spirits who never found peace. And the more you look, the more you realize these stories aren't rare. They're everywhere. The Pokédex is littered with entries that hint at parasitic control, cannibalism, eternal sorrow, and brutal evolutionary trauma. And that's just the start. We'll explore the questionable ethics of evolution, the horrifying implications of Pokémon breeding, the sentience behind their eyes, how much they understand, how much they feel. Because when you really listen, some Pokémon don't just want to be strong, they want to be free, or loved, or left alone. And what about us, the trainers, the humans in this world? Are we truly caretakers, or are we exploiters in denial? We say we love our Pokémon, but we also battle them until they collapse, trade them like currency, breed them for stats. Is it partnership or ownership? We'll examine the villain teams not as cartoons, but reflections of real-world evils, corporate greed, environmental destruction, radical extremism, and the eerie glitches that hint at something broken beneath the code. And we'll question the godlike legendaries, these ancient forces of time, space, and death, who don't always act as protectors. Some myths, after all, weren't meant to be comforting. So if you grew up with Pokémon, and you've ever felt like there was something deeper, something sadder, hidden beneath the joy, you were right. This is part 1, Twisted Tales from the Pokédex, a descent into the lore we ignored, the stories we weren't ready to hear. But now we're listening. Remember that seemingly bright and cheerful universe? Well, let's pull back the curtain, shall we? Because underneath the cutesy designs and the catchy battle cries lies a world with some seriously messed up lore. And it all starts with the Pokédex. We trusted that little gadget, didn't we? It was our guide, our encyclopedia, our key to understanding these amazing creatures. But what if the Pokédex wasn't just informing us, but subtly warning us? What if the entries we glossed over as kids held disturbing truths about the Pokémon world? Prepare yourselves, because we're diving deep into the twisted tales hidden within those digital pages. We're talking about Pokémon whose existence is defined by parasitic relationships, Pokémon forced into servitude, and Pokémon driven to the brink of madness or despair. These aren't just isolated incidents. They paint a picture of a world far more complex and, frankly, far more terrifying than we ever imagined. Let's start with a Pokémon that embodies the idea of parasitic dependence, Parasect. On the surface, it's a bugger grass type, a seemingly harmless mushroom Pokémon. But the Pokédex entries tell a different story. They describe how a parasitic mushroom, known as the Tochikaso, has completely taken over the host. Think about that for a second. The cute little bug is essentially a puppet, controlled by a fungus that has burrowed its way into its brain. The insect's free will is gone, its life force drained to fuel the mushroom's growth. The Pokédex even states that the mushroom spores are scattered when the parasect dies, ensuring the cycle of parasitic infection continues. Is that not horrifying? We're talking about a complete loss of self, a forced symbiosis that benefits only the parasite. And it gets worse. Some entries suggest that the parasect is aware of its condition, trapped within its own body as the mushroom dictates its every move. Imagine the constant, silent scream of a creature forced to live a life not its own. Then we have Cubone. This Pokémon is perhaps one of the most tragic. The Pokédex describes Cubone as wearing the skull of its deceased mother. It cries mournfully at the moon, forever grieving its loss. That image alone is enough to tug at anyone's heartstrings. But let's dig a little deeper. Why does Cubone wear its mother's skull? Is it simply a memento of love, or is there something more sinister at play? Some theories suggest that the skull provides Cubone with a sense of protection, a shield against the harsh realities of the world. Others believe that the skull allows Cubone to somehow communicate with its deceased mother, seeking guidance and comfort in its eternal sorrow. Regardless of the reason, the fact remains that Cubone is forever haunted by its past. It's a Pokémon defined by grief, a constant reminder of loss and loneliness. It's a dark and depressing existence, one that challenges our perception of the Pokémon world as a place of joy and adventure. And what about Yamask? The Pokédex entry states that each Yamask carries a mask that represents the face it had when it was human. And even more disturbingly, it sometimes gazes at it and begins to cry. Let that sink in. This isn't just some random ghost Pokémon, it's the lingering spirit of a person, trapped in a spectral form, forever tormented by the memory of its past life. What kind of life did these Yamask have? Were they happy? Were they loved? Or were they filled with regret and despair? The Pokédex doesn't tell us, but the implication is clear. These are souls in torment, forced to relive their past existence for eternity. It's a chilling reminder of mortality and the potential for eternal suffering. Let's shift gears a bit and talk about forced servitude. We often see Pokémon used in battles, but what if their role goes beyond willing participants? What if they're essentially slaves, forced to obey their trainers against their will? Consider the case of Bahayam. The Pokédex describes Bahayam as using its psychic powers to control the memories of others. It can alter perceptions, erase memories, and even implant false ones. Now, imagine that power in the wrong hands. A trainer could potentially use a Bahayam to brainwash a Pokémon, forcing it to obey their every command. The implications are staggering. We could be talking about Pokémon forced to fight against their friends, Pokémon forced to perform dangerous tasks, Pokémon forced to live in constant fear of their trainers. It's a dark and disturbing thought, one that challenges the very foundation of the trainer-Pokémon relationship. Then there's Hypno. This Pokémon is notorious for its hypnotic abilities. It carries a pendulum that it uses to lull its victims into a trance. But the Pokédex entries take a sinister turn when they mention Hypno's penchant for kidnapping children. Yes, you heard that right. This seemingly harmless Pokémon is a predator, preying on the innocent and vulnerable. It's a terrifying thought, one that shatters the illusion of safety and security in the Pokémon world. What happens to these children? Are they ever seen again? The Pokédex leaves us with more questions than answers, fueling our darkest fears. And let's not forget about the Pokémon driven to madness or despair. These are creatures that have been pushed to their breaking point, their minds twisted and broken by trauma and hardship. Take Mimikyu, for example. This ghost fairy type hides under a Pikachu costume, desperately seeking attention and affection. The Pokédex warns that anyone who sees Mimikyu's true form will be struck by a mysterious illness or even die from shock. Why is Mimikyu so desperate to hide its true appearance? What terrible secret does it conceal beneath that disguise? Some theories suggest that Mimikyu is a lonely and forgotten Pokémon, rejected by society for its monstrous appearance. Others believe that Mimikyu is cursed, doomed to forever hide its true form from the world. Whatever the reason, Mimikyu's existence is one of constant pain and isolation. It's a Pokémon driven to the brink of madness by its own self-loathing and fear of rejection. It's a tragic tale of a creature yearning for love and acceptance, but forever trapped in a cycle of despair. Then we have Frostlass. This ice ghost type is said to be the spirit of a woman who got lost on a snowy mountain and froze to death. The Pokédex entries describe Frostlass as preying on unsuspecting travelers, freezing them solid and displaying them as decorations in its icy lair. Is this a case of revenge? Is Frostlass lashing out at the world for the suffering it endured in its past life? Or is it simply a creature driven mad by the cold and the loneliness, its mind twisted by the icy winds? Whatever the reason, Frostlass is a dangerous and terrifying Pokémon, a reminder of the fragility of life and the potential for darkness to consume us all. These are just a few examples of the twisted tales hidden within the Pokédex. They paint a picture of a world far more complex and disturbing than we ever imagined. Parasitic relationships, forced servitude, Pokémon driven to madness or despair. These are not just isolated incidents, but recurring themes that challenge our perception of the Pokémon world. But what does it all mean? Why are these dark and disturbing elements present in a seemingly children's game? Is it simply a case of accidental oversight? Or is there something more intentional at play? Are the creators of Pokémon trying to tell us something about the nature of the world? About the potential for darkness to exist even in the most seemingly innocent places? These Pokédex entries, disturbing as they are, offer a glimpse into the darker side of the Pokémon universe. They force us to confront uncomfortable truths about power, control, and the potential for suffering. They remind us that even in a world filled with magic and wonder, there is still room for pain, loss, and despair. And maybe, just maybe, that's the point. Perhaps the creators of Pokémon are trying to teach us a valuable lesson, that even in the face of darkness there is still hope. That even in the midst of suffering there is still the potential for love, compassion, and connection. That even the most twisted tales can have a silver lining, a reminder that even in the darkest of times we are not alone. But this disturbing peek behind the curtain of the Pokédex is just the beginning, because it raises an even bigger question. What about the legendary Pokémon? These beings of immense power and influence, worshipped as gods and feared as destroyers. What secrets do they hold? And what happens when these gods go wrong? That's exactly what we'll be uncovering next. Part 2. Legendary Lore. When gods go wrong. Okay, so we've poked around the dark corners of the Pokédex, seen the disturbing implications of Pokémon existing alongside humans. But what happens when we look higher? To the beings that shaped this world, the so-called legendary Pokémon. These aren't just rare creatures with cool designs. They're often presented as gods, forces of nature, or ancient guardians. And that's where things get complicated. Because gods, as we know from our own history and mythology, aren't always benevolent. Sometimes they're downright terrifying. Let's start with creation. In the Sinnoh region, we have Arceus, the Pokémon said to have created the entire universe. A being of unimaginable power. But think about that power for a second. The power to create also implies the power to destroy. The mythology states that Arceus emerged from an egg in a vortex of nothingness, and then shaped the world with its 1,000 arms. Sounds impressive, right? But what if Arceus wasn't feeling so creative that day? What if it woke up on the wrong side of the cosmic bed and decided to unmake everything? We're told that Arceus created Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina, the masters of time, space, and antimatter, respectively. These three are essentially the cornerstones of reality as we know it. But they're not exactly a happy family. Giratina, banished to the distortion world for its violent tendencies, is a constant reminder that even divine creations can go wrong. Imagine being tasked with managing antimatter, the stuff that annihilates everything it touches. Talk about a stressful job. Is it any wonder Giratina's a bit edgy? And then you have Dialga and Palkia, constantly at odds, their battles threatening to tear apart the very fabric of space-time. It's like Arceus created three siblings, gave them immense power, and then just hoped they'd play nice. The thing is, these creation myths often gloss over the potential for disaster. We're so focused on the awesome power of these beings that we forget to ask, what are their motivations? What happens when their goals clash? Think about the late Guardians, Uxia, Mesprit, and Azelf. They represent knowledge, emotion, and willpower, respectively. Sounds like a pretty well-balanced team, right? But what if one of them decided that humans didn't deserve knowledge, or that emotions were a weakness? A glimpse of this potential in Pokémon Legends Arceus, where the late Guardians test the player's worthiness. Fail their tests, and you face their wrath. They're not just handing out wisdom like candy, they're actively judging humanity. And what if their judgment is harsh? The lore surrounding legendary Pokémon is filled with prophecies, warnings, and tales of impending doom. The Hoenn region, for example, has Groudon and Kyogre, ancient Pokémon who embody the land and the sea. Their battles are said to cause earthquakes and tsunamis, reshaping the world in their wake. We're told that Rayquaza, the sky-high Pokémon, is the only one who can quell their rage. But what if Rayquaza wasn't around? Or what if it decided to join the fight? The entire region could be swallowed by the ocean or turned into a barren wasteland. These aren't just theoretical scenarios. The consequences of legendary Pokémon clashing in the games themselves. Cities are destroyed, landscapes are warped, and the balance of nature is thrown into chaos. And all because these powerful beings can't seem to get along. Consider the Unova region and the legend of Reshiram and Zekrom. These two Pokémon represent truth and ideals, respectively. They were once a single dragon, but split due to a conflict between two brothers. This division created a never-ending struggle between those who seek truth and those who pursue ideals. It's a philosophical debate embodied in two immensely powerful dragons, constantly battling and influencing the course of history. But what happens when truth and ideals become twisted? What happens when someone uses truth to manipulate or ideals to justify violence? The potential for this in the actions of Team Plasma, who exploit the legend of Reshiram and Zekrom to further their own agenda. The problem is we often treat these legendary Pokémon as tools. We capture them, train them, and use them to battle. We forget that they're supposed to be forces of nature, ancient guardians, even gods. Imagine capturing Zeus and forcing him to fight your neighbor's poodle. It sounds ridiculous, right? But that's essentially what we're doing with these legendary Pokémon. We're reducing them to commodities, ignoring the immense power they wield and the potential consequences of our actions. And it's not just about battling. We also breed Pokémon, manipulate their DNA, and experiment on them. We're playing God ourselves, without fully understanding the ramifications of our actions. The lore of legendary Pokémon is a cautionary tale. It's a reminder that power comes with responsibility, and that even the most benevolent beings can be corrupted. It's a reflection of our own history, filled with stories of gods who went wrong, of empires that crumbled, and of civilizations that destroyed themselves. We need to start questioning the narratives we've been given. Are these legendary Pokémon truly benevolent guardians, or are they simply powerful beings with their own agendas? Are we truly worthy of their power, or are we just playing with forces we don't understand? The answers, I suspect, are far more complex and disturbing than we might want to believe. Perhaps the real monsters aren't the Pokémon with the scary Pokédex entries, but those who seek to control and exploit them. But this leads to an even more unsettling question. If not careful, are we destined to become the very villains we fight against? This is where things get truly uncomfortable, because the line between hero and villain, between caretaker and exploiter, is often blurred in the Pokémon world. It's a line that we, as players, are constantly straddling. And that brings us to the ethical minefield that is the relationship between humans and Pokémon. Are we truly the benevolent caretakers we believe ourselves to be, or are we in fact the real monsters of this world? Part 3. Human exploitation. Are we the real monsters? Have you ever stopped to consider the power dynamic at play in the Pokémon world? We're so focused on becoming the very best, like no one ever was, that we rarely question the ethics of what we're doing. We trap wild creatures, force them to battle, and then expect them to be our loyal companions. Is that really a fair exchange? Think about it. From the moment we choose our starter Pokémon, we're initiating a relationship built on, well, what exactly? Is it friendship? Is it servitude? Or is it something far more complicated, something that we conveniently ignore in our quest for victory? These creatures, these Pokémon, as tools to win battles, tools to complete our Pokédex, tools to achieve our own personal goals. We praise them when they're strong, we train them relentlessly, and we box them away when they're no longer useful. It's a harsh reality, isn't it? One that's often masked by the cheerful music and colourful graphics. But what if we stripped away that veneer? What if we looked at the world through the eyes of a Pokémon forced to fight for the amusement of its trainer? Would they see us as benevolent protectors, or as something far more sinister? Let's consider the practice of Pokémon battling. It's the cornerstone of the entire franchise, the driving force behind our adventures. We pit our Pokémon against each other, often pushing them to their limits, all for the sake of competition. But is it truly consensual? Can a Pokémon really understand the concept of a strategic battle, or are they simply acting on instinct and obedience? There are Pokédex entries that hint at the darker side of battling. Take Cubone, for example. It wears the skull of its deceased mother, a constant reminder of its loss and loneliness. Yet we still force it to battle, to endure even more pain and suffering. Is that really the act of a caring trainer? Or consider the plight of Magikarp. It's notoriously weak and often ridiculed for its uselessness. Yet trainers still capture and train them, forcing them to endure countless defeats until they finally evolve into the powerful Gyarados. Is that a testament to the power of perseverance, or a cruel and unnecessary ordeal? Then there's breeding. We selectively breed Pokémon for specific traits, creating generations of creatures designed for optimal performance in battle. It's essentially eugenics, but with Pokémon. Are we playing God? And what happens to the Pokémon that don't meet our standards? Are they simply discarded, forgotten, left to languish in the wild? The Pokémon Day cares. Those seemingly innocuous places where we leave our Pokémon to, well, you know, what goes on behind those closed doors. Do the Pokémon truly consent to this process? Or are they simply pawns in our breeding programs, forced to produce offspring for our own selfish desires? It's easy to dismiss these questions as mere speculation, as overthinking a children's game. But the Pokédex itself provides ample evidence of the potential for human exploitation. Consider the entry for Machoke. It states that Machoke offer their services to humans, assisting with construction and heavy lifting. Sounds noble, right? But what if they're not offering their services willingly? What if they're being coerced, forced into servitude by unscrupulous trainers? And then there's Kadabra. The Pokédex entry claims that a young boy with psychic abilities was transformed into a Kadabra after an incident involving a spoon. It's a bizarre and unsettling transformation, one that raises serious questions about the nature of Pokémon and the potential for human interference. Was this transformation voluntary? Or was the boy subjected to some kind of experiment, a twisted attempt to harness the power of Pokémon? Examples of this potential for abuse throughout the Pokémon world. Team Rocket, with their blatant disregard for Pokémon welfare, are the obvious villains. But what about the less obvious cases? What about the trainers who push their Pokémon too hard, who neglect their needs, who treat them as mere commodities? Are they not also guilty of exploitation? Think about the countless NPCs we encounter throughout our adventures. The fishermen who spend their days reeling in Magikarp, the miners who use Geodude to excavate tunnels, the farmers who rely on Pokémon to tend their crops. Are these relationships truly symbiotic? Or are they built on a foundation of unequal power, where Pokémon are forced to work for the benefit of humans? The ethical implications are staggering. We've created a world where sentient beings are bought, sold, and forced to fight for our amusement. We've normalized the concept of capturing wild animals and enslaving them to our will. And we've done it all under the guise of friendship and adventure. But what if the Pokémon world isn't as idyllic as we've always believed? What if it's a reflection of our own flaws, our own capacity for cruelty and exploitation? What if we, the trainers, are the real monsters? This isn't just about Pokémon, is it? It's about our relationship with the natural world, our tendency to exploit resources for our own benefit, our willingness to turn a blind eye to suffering in the pursuit of progress. The Pokémon world, in its own strange and whimsical way, holds a mirror up to our own society, forcing us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves. Are we truly deserving of the trust and loyalty of Pokémon? Have we earned their respect? Or are we simply taking advantage of their inherent kindness and willingness to please? These are questions that we must grapple with, not just as players of a game, but as inhabitants of this planet. Consider the ethical implications of forcing a Pokémon to evolve. We often view evolution as a positive thing, a sign of growth and progress. But what if the Pokémon doesn't want to evolve? What if it's happy with its current form? Are we respecting its autonomy, or are we imposing our own desires upon it? The evolution process itself can be traumatic. Some Pokémon, like Shelder attaching to Slowpoke's tail to trigger Slowbro's evolution, endure physical discomfort and psychological stress. Are we justified in subjecting them to this process simply to gain a stronger Pokémon? And what about the Pokémon that are unable to evolve? Are they considered less valuable? Are they relegated to the sidelines, forever overshadowed by their evolved counterparts? It's a harsh reality, one that highlights the inherent inequality within the Pokémon world. We often talk about the importance of training our Pokémon, of helping them reach their full potential. But what does that really mean? Are we training them to be stronger, more efficient fighters? Or are we training them to be obedient, compliant servants? The line between training and exploitation can be blurry. We praise our Pokémon for following our commands, for executing our strategies flawlessly. But are we truly respecting their individuality, their own unique strengths and weaknesses? Or are we simply molding them into weapons, tools to be used in our quest for victory? The Pokédex entries often describe Pokémon as having human-like emotions and intelligence. They experience joy, sadness, anger, and fear. They form bonds with their trainers and with each other. They are, in many ways, sentient beings. Yet we treat them as property, as objects to be collected and traded. Is that really the way we should be treating creatures that are capable of feeling and thinking? Are we not obligated to treat them with respect and compassion? Or are we so blinded by our own desires that we are incapable of seeing them as anything more than tools? The Pokémon world is filled with examples of humans exploiting Pokémon for personal gain. From the illegal poaching of rare Pokémon to the unethical experimentation on Pokémon DNA, there are countless instances of humans abusing their power. Team Plasma, with their radical views on Pokémon liberation, may seem extreme. But their underlying message, that Pokémon deserve to be free from human control, resonates with many players. They force us to question the very foundations of the Pokémon world, to consider the possibility that we are not the benevolent caretakers we believe ourselves to be. The truth is, the relationship between humans and Pokémon is complex and multifaceted. It's a relationship that is often built on love, trust, and mutual respect. But it's also a relationship that is fraught with potential for exploitation and abuse. We must be mindful of the power we wield as trainers. We must strive to treat our Pokémon with compassion and respect. And we must always be willing to question our own motives, to consider whether we are truly acting in the best interests of our Pokémon. The future of the Pokémon world depends on it. If we continue down the path of exploitation and abuse, we risk destroying the very thing that makes the Pokémon world so special. But if we choose to embrace a more ethical and compassionate approach, we can create a world where humans and Pokémon can coexist in harmony. So, are we the real monsters? The answer, like so much in the Pokémon world, is not simple. It's a question that we must continue to ask ourselves, to grapple with, as we navigate this complex and ever-evolving world. Because the fate of Pokémon, and perhaps even our own humanity, may depend on it. But this discovery was only the beginning. because next, we uncover the hidden truths and terrifying implications behind the actions of the villainous teams that plague the Pokémon world, and how they mirror the darkest aspects of our own. Before we dive deeper into this incredible journey, I'm curious, where in the world are you watching this from? Drop a comment below and let our global community know. And if you're finding this as mind-blowing as I am, hit that like button to help more people discover this story. Part 4, Villainous Ventures, a reflection of real-world evils. We've seen the bizarre realities of the Pokédex, the potentially terrifying power of legendary Pokémon, and even questioned our own roles in this world. But what happens when the dark undercurrents of the Pokémon universe aren't just subtle hints or unsettling implications? What happens when they manifest in tangible, organized forces? That's where the villainous teams come in. Now, on the surface, they seem like typical video game baddies, right? Over-the-top outfits, ridiculous schemes, and a whole lot of grunts who can't seem to win a battle. But if you look closer, peel back the layers of absurdity, you might find something far more unsettling, reflections of very real-world evils. Think about Team Rocket, the OG villains. They're not just stealing Pokémon for kicks, they're after profit. They want to control the market, exploit rare species, and generally become obscenely wealthy. Sound familiar? It should. It's a classic case of corporate greed, a ruthless pursuit of profit at any cost, even if it means harming the environment and exploiting living creatures. They're a caricature, sure, but a caricature rooted in the very real dangers of unchecked capitalism. Giovanni, the head honcho, isn't just some power-hungry maniac. He's a cold, calculating businessman. He sees Pokémon as commodities, tools to be used and discarded. He's the embodiment of the soulless executive, prioritizing the bottom line above all else. You see echoes of this in real-world industries that prioritize profit over sustainability, that exploit natural resources without regard for the consequences. And what about Team Aqua and Team Magma? They seem like polar opposites, one wanting to flood the world, the other to expand the land. But their motivations are surprisingly similar. A desire to reshape the world according to their own narrow ideologies. Team Aqua, led by Archie, believes that humanity is damaging the oceans and that the only way to save them is to revert the world to a primordial state. Team Magma, under Maxie's command, thinks that humanity needs more land to develop and prosper, even if it means drying up the oceans. Both teams are essentially environmental extremists, driven by a distorted view of what's best for the planet. They're not necessarily evil in the traditional sense. They genuinely believe they're doing the right thing. But their methods are destructive, and their vision is ultimately flawed. This is where the parallel to real-world problems becomes even more striking. Similar conflicts playing out in debates about climate change, conservation, and resource management. People with genuinely good intentions can have drastically different ideas about how to solve environmental problems, and those differences can lead to conflict and even violence. The key difference, of course, is that in the Pokémon world, these conflicts often involve summoning ancient legendary Pokémon with the power to reshape the entire planet, which, you know, adds a certain level of drama. Then there's Team Galactic. They make Team Rocket look like a bunch of petty thieves. Cyrus, their leader, is a nihilistic sociopath who wants to destroy the entire universe and create a new one in his own image. He sees the current world as flawed and meaningless, and he believes that only by erasing it can he create something perfect. Cyrus isn't just driven by greed or a desire for power. He's driven by a fundamental dissatisfaction with existence itself. He's searching for meaning in a world that he perceives as inherently meaningless. His methods, of course, are completely insane. He's willing to sacrifice countless lives to achieve his goal. But his underlying motivation, the search for meaning and purpose, is something that many people can relate to, even if they wouldn't go to such extreme lengths. Think about the rise of extremist ideologies in the real world. Often, these ideologies are fueled by a sense of alienation, a feeling that the world is broken and that only a radical transformation can fix it. Cyrus embodies this kind of thinking, taken to its most extreme conclusion. But the parallels don't stop there. Consider Team Plasma, who claim to be fighting for Pokémon liberation. They argue that Pokémon are enslaved by humans and that they should be set free. On the surface, this seems like a noble cause. Who wouldn't want to protect innocent creatures from harm? However, Team Plasma's true motivations are far more complex. Getsis, their leader, is a manipulative and power-hungry individual who uses the rhetoric of Pokémon liberation to further his own agenda. He wants to control the world, and he sees Pokémon liberation as a means to that end. He preys on people's emotions, exploiting their empathy for Pokémon to gain support. He's a master of propaganda, twisting the truth to suit his own purposes. Sound familiar? It should. Similar tactics used by politicians and other leaders who exploit social issues to gain power. The ethical questions raised by Team Plasma are particularly relevant in the real world. What is our responsibility to animals? Do we have the right to use them for our own benefit? These are complex questions with no easy answers, and Team Plasma forces us to confront them in a very direct way. And then there's Team Flare, who want to create a beautiful world by destroying everyone who doesn't fit their narrow definition of beauty. Lysandra, their leader, is a wealthy and influential scientist who believes that humanity is inherently flawed and that the only way to create a perfect world is to eliminate the vast majority of the population. This is where echoes of eugenics and other dangerous ideologies that have plagued human history. Lysandra's vision of a beautiful world is based on exclusion and discrimination. He's essentially advocating for a form of genocide, all in the name of creating a more aesthetically pleasing society. The idea that some people are inherently more valuable than others is a dangerous one, and Team Flare serves as a stark reminder of the consequences of such thinking. It forces you to confront the uncomfortable truth that even in a seemingly fantastical world, the darkest aspects of human nature can still emerge. Team Skull, while seemingly more comedic than the other villainous teams, still offers a commentary on real-world issues. They're essentially a gang of dropouts and misfits who have been rejected by society. They lack direction and purpose, and they turn to petty crime and vandalism as a way to fill the void. Guzma, their leader, is a particularly tragic figure. He's a talented trainer who was unable to achieve his dreams, and he projects his own failures onto his followers. He creates a culture of negativity and resentment, trapping his members in a cycle of despair. Team Skull reflects the real-world problems of poverty, inequality, and lack of opportunity. It shows what happens when people are left behind by society and feel like they have no other options. They're a reminder that even in a world filled with powerful Pokémon, social and economic factors can still play a significant role in shaping people's lives. And let's not forget Team Yell. While they're not strictly villainous, in the same way as the other teams, they still represent a problematic aspect of fandom and tribalism. They're overly zealous fans who will do anything to support their favorite trainer, Marnie, even if it means harassing and sabotaging her opponents. Team Yell highlights the dangers of toxic fandom and the pressure that can be placed on individuals to conform to group norms. It shows how easily enthusiasm can turn into obsession and how quickly people can become blinded by their loyalty. You see echoes of this in the real world, in online communities and political movements where people are often more interested in attacking their opponents than in engaging in constructive dialogue. Team Yell serves as a cautionary tale about the importance of critical thinking and the dangers of blindly following the crowd. What's fascinating is how these villainous teams often reflect the specific anxieties and concerns of the time and place in which the games were created. Team Rocket, with their focus on corporate greed, emerged during a period of economic boom and growing inequality. Team Aqua and Team Magma, with their environmental extremism, reflected the growing awareness of climate change and the debates surrounding environmental policy. Team Galactic, with their nihilistic worldview, mirrored the anxieties of a post-9/11 world. Each team, in its own way, holds up a mirror to society, forcing us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves and the world around us. They're not just obstacles to overcome, they're reflections of our own flaws and failings. So, the next time you encounter a villainous team in a Pokémon game, don't just dismiss them as cartoonish baddies. Take a closer look. Consider their motivations, their methods, and the real-world issues they might be reflecting. You might be surprised at what you discover. But this discovery was only the beginning, because next we uncover the hidden truths and chilling mysteries surrounding one of the most infamous locations in the Pokémon world, Lavender Town. What darkness lurks beneath its seemingly peaceful surface? And what secrets does it hold about the very nature of life and death in the Pokémon universe? Part 5, Glitches and Ghosts, unraveling the mysteries of Lavender Town and beyond. Remember that feeling, that creeping sense of unease when things just didn't quite work right. A flicker on the screen, a strange sound emanating from your Game Boy, a moment where the game seemed to know something didn't. That's the feeling we're chasing today. We've explored the darker implications of the Pokémon world, the twisted realities hidden beneath the surface of a seemingly innocent adventure. But sometimes the most unsettling truths aren't written into the lore. They're found in the cracks, the glitches, the whispers of things unseen. And no place is more synonymous with those whispers than Lavender Town. For many of us, Lavender Town was our first real brush with the unsettling. It wasn't just the somber music, though that certainly played a part. It was the town itself, a resting place for Pokémon. A place where death, a concept largely absent from the vibrant world we'd come to know, was unavoidable. But the original Pokémon Red and Blue, or Green in Japan, had something more sinister than just a graveyard. It had a soundtrack that, according to legend, drove some children to madness. The story goes that the original Lavender Town theme contained frequencies that were harmful, even fatal, to young ears. These frequencies, undetectable to adults, allegedly caused headaches, nausea, and even suicidal thoughts in children who listened to them. The theory suggests that the altered music in later versions of the game was a direct response to these incidents. Now, is there concrete proof of this? No. But the legend persists. It's a chilling example of how a simple video game can tap into primal fears, anxieties about the unknown, and the vulnerability of childhood. What made Lavender Town so potent? Was it simply the juxtaposition of the cheerful Pokémon world with the grim reality of death, or was there something more at play? Perhaps it was the psychological priming. The game itself sets the stage for unease. You've just witnessed your rival's Raticate, a Pokémon he clearly cared for, seemingly die in battle. He's standing in the Pokémon Tower, a monument to deceased Pokémon, mourning his loss. The game forces you to confront mortality, setting you up for the unsettling atmosphere of Lavender Town. And then there's the Pokémon Tower itself. A multi-story structure filled with grieving trainers, channelers possessed by spirits, and the restless ghosts of deceased Pokémon. The initial encounter with these ghosts is particularly unnerving. Your Pokémon are unable to attack them. They simply recoil in fear. It's a stark reminder that you're not always in control. That there are forces in this world beyond your understanding, beyond your ability to conquer through brute force. But the creepiest part of the Pokémon Tower has to be the story of the orphaned Cubone and its deceased mother, Marowak. Team Rocket, in their infinite cruelty, attempts to steal the Cubone, triggering Marowak's protective spirit. You witness the spectral form of Marowak, driven mad by grief and rage, protecting its child. You, the player, are forced to battle this tormented spirit, ultimately freeing it from its earthly prison. The Marowak story is a powerful example of the game's ability to evoke empathy and sadness. It's a reminder that even in a world filled with fantastical creatures and epic battles, there's still room for genuine emotion and loss. It's a stark contrast to the often light-hearted nature of the rest of the game, and it's what makes Lavender Town so memorable, so haunting. But Lavender Town is more than just a creepy town and a sad story. It's a gateway to the glitches, the errors, the unintended consequences of the game's code. And that brings us to perhaps the most famous glitch of all, Missing No. Missing No. The name itself is shrouded in mystery. What is it? Where did it come from? And why does it wreak such havoc on your game? Missing No, short for Missing Number, is a glitch Pokémon that appears in the original Pokémon Red and Blue. It's not a Pokémon that was intentionally designed or programmed into the game. Instead, it's a byproduct of the game's programming, a consequence of how the game handles data and memory. To understand Missing No, you need to understand a little bit about how the game works. When you encounter a wild Pokémon, the game needs to load the data for that Pokémon into memory. This data includes the Pokémon species, level, moveset, and other attributes. The game typically pulls this data from a specific location in the game's ROM, which is essentially a read-only memory chip. However, the game also uses temporary memory locations to store information about the area you're in, including the types of Pokémon that can be found there. This temporary memory is overwritten when you move to a new area. The Missing No glitch exploits a loophole in this system. By performing a specific sequence of actions, you can manipulate the game into loading data from the wrong memory location. This involves talking to an old man in Viridian City who teaches you how to catch Pokémon, and then immediately flying to Cinnabar Island and surfing along the east coast. The old man's dialogue temporarily modifies the player's name data in the game's memory. When you then surf along the east coast of Cinnabar Island, the game mistakenly uses this modified name data to determine which Pokémon to encounter. This leads to the game trying to load Pokémon data from an invalid memory address, resulting in the appearance of Missing No. But Missing No isn't just a visual anomaly. It can have serious consequences for your game. Encountering Missing No can corrupt your save data, duplicate items in your inventory, and even cause graphical glitches. Why? Because Missing No isn't a real Pokémon, it's just random data being interpreted as a Pokémon. This random data can overwrite important parts of the game's memory, leading to unpredictable and often disastrous results. The Missing No glitch became a sensation among Pokémon players. It was a way to cheat the game, to duplicate rare items, and to encounter Pokémon that weren't normally available. But it was also a reminder that the game wasn't perfect. That there were hidden flaws, unintended consequences lurking beneath the surface. Missing No is more than just a glitch. It's a symbol of the hidden complexities of the game, a reminder that even the most carefully crafted worlds can have cracks and flaws. It's a testament to the ingenuity of players who are able to discover and exploit these flaws. But Missing No isn't the only glitch in the Pokémon world. There are countless other glitches, errors, and unintended consequences that players have discovered over the years. There's the infamous Trainer Escape glitch, which allows you to skip entire sections of the game by exploiting a flaw in the trainer battle system. There's the Item Underflow glitch, which allows you to obtain an unlimited number of rare items by manipulating the game's inventory system. And then there are the more bizarre and unsettling glitches. The glitches that cause Pokémon to transform into strange, distorted versions of themselves. The glitches that cause the game's music to become distorted and unsettling. The glitches that seem to hint at something more, something hidden beneath the surface of the game. These glitches, like the Lavender Town syndrome, often spawn their own urban legends. Tales of haunted cartridges, possessed Game Boys, and hidden messages embedded within the game's code. One popular legend involves a glitched version of Pokémon Ruby and Sapphire that purportedly contains a hidden message from a deceased game developer. The message, which is said to appear only under specific circumstances, allegedly reveals the developer's regrets and warnings about the dangers of technology. Another legend involves a glitched version of Pokémon Black and White that supposedly contains a hidden Pokémon called Hypno's Lullaby. This Pokémon, which is said to be based on the creepypasta of the same name, allegedly kidnaps children and leads them into the forest. These legends, while likely fictional, speak to our fascination with the unknown, our desire to find hidden meanings and secrets in the world around us. They're a reminder that even in a seemingly innocent game, there's always room for darkness, for mystery, for the unsettling. But what is it about these glitches and legends that captivates us so much? Why are we so drawn to the strange, the unexplained, the unsettling? Perhaps it's because they challenge our perception of reality. They remind us that the world isn't always what it seems, that there are hidden layers, unseen forces at play. Or perhaps it's because they offer a glimpse into the minds of the game developers, a chance to see the code that makes the game tick, to understand the logic behind the magic. Whatever the reason, glitches and legends have become an integral part of the Pokémon experience. They're a reminder that even in a world of fantastical creatures and epic battles, there's still room for mystery, for the unsettling, for the unknown. And it's not just the original games that are susceptible. Even in the modern, meticulously polished versions of Pokémon, glitches persist, albeit often more subtle. They are quickly patched, of course, but the initial discovery and sharing of these anomalies online creates a similar sense of community and wonder. Think about it. Speedrunners exploit glitches to shave milliseconds off their times, pushing the boundaries of what's possible within the game. They are modern-day explorers of the digital unknown. These glitches, these errors, these unintended consequences, they're all part of the Pokémon story. They're a reminder that the game isn't perfect, that it's a constantly evolving, constantly changing entity. They are, in a strange way, what keeps the game alive. They give us something to talk about, something to explore, something to be fascinated by. So, the next time you encounter a glitch in your Pokémon game, don't just dismiss it as an error. Embrace it. Explore it. See where it takes you. You might just discover something unexpected, something unsettling, something truly fascinating. Because the truth is, the Pokémon world is full of secrets, hidden meanings, and unsettling truths. You just have to be willing to look for them. And sometimes, those truths are found not in the official lore, but in the cracks, the glitches, the whispers of things unseen. But this glimpse into the digital unknown was only a prelude, a mere scratching of the surface. Because next, we uncover the complex and surprisingly dark world of human exploitation within the Pokémon universe and ask the unsettling question, are the real monsters? I hope you're as amazed by this as I am. If you want to stay updated on more content like this, make sure to subscribe and join our community of curious minds. Trust me, what's coming next will challenge everything you thought you knew. Part 6: Existential Dread and Environmental Disaster. The hidden themes of Pokémon. Okay, so we've dissected the disturbing Pokédex entries, explored the darker sides of legendary lore, and even questioned humanity's role as potential exploiters within the Pokémon world. We've seen villainous teams mirror real-world evils and plunged into the glitchy depths of Lavender Town's urban legends. But what if I told you that beneath the surface of all this, there lies something even more profound? Something that touches upon the very nature of existence and the potential for ecological collapse. We're talking about existential dread and environmental disaster, not as explicit plot points but as pervasive, almost unintentional themes woven into the very fabric of the Pokémon universe. Think about it. A world populated by creatures of immense power, some capable of reshaping reality itself. A world where a child can command these forces, often without fully understanding the consequences. It's a recipe for chaos, and more subtly, for a creeping sense of unease. Let's start with the existential dread. Consider the Pokémon themselves. Many of them exist solely to fulfill a single, predetermined purpose. Take Magikarp, for example. Its Pokédex entries consistently describe it as weak and pathetic, only capable of flopping around. Its entire existence seems to be defined by its eventual evolution into the powerful Gyarados. But what if a Magikarp evolve? What if it remains, forever, a useless splashing fish? Does it question its purpose? Does it experience a sense of existential angst? It's easy to dismiss this as just a silly thought experiment, but the sheer number of Pokémon with similarly limited existences suggests a deeper, more unsettling truth. Pokémon like Ditto, whose primary function is to transform and breed. Or Pokémon, like Trubbish, literally made of garbage, whose existence is a direct result of human waste. Are they simply biological machines, devoid of self-awareness? Or do they possess some level of consciousness, burdened by the knowledge of their own limitations and the circumstances of their creation? And what about the Pokémon whose existence is tied to specific objects or locations? Pokémon like Honedge, a sword possessed by a wandering spirit, or Pokémon like Phantump, the spirit of a child who got lost in the forest. Their existence is inherently fragile, dependent on external factors that could be destroyed or altered at any moment. Imagine the constant anxiety of knowing that your entire being could be erased with the breaking of a sword or the felling of a tree. This existential dread isn't limited to individual Pokémon. It extends to the very structure of their society. The Pokémon world is built on the concept of battling. Pokémon are constantly forced to fight each other, often for the amusement or benefit of humans. Is this a healthy or sustainable way of life? Does it breed resentment and fear? Do Pokémon ever question the morality of this system? We often see Pokémon happily engaging in battles, but is that genuine enthusiasm or simply a learned behavior? Are they truly content with their role as fighting machines, or are they suppressing a deeper, more primal instinct for self-preservation? And what about the Pokémon who are forced to battle against their will? The Pokémon who are captured and trained by cruel or neglectful trainers. Their suffering is often glossed over in the games and anime, but it's a dark undercurrent that runs throughout the entire franchise. The games themselves often hint at this underlying unease. The existence of ghost-type Pokémon, for example, suggests a lingering connection to the afterlife, a reminder of mortality and the inevitability of death. The presence of powerful psychic-type Pokémon raises questions about free will and the potential for mind control. The existence of Ultra Beasts, creatures from alternate dimensions, hints at the vastness and incomprehensibility of the universe. These elements, while not always explicitly addressed, contribute to a subtle sense of existential dread that permeates the Pokémon world. It's a world where the lines between reality and fantasy are blurred, where the natural order is constantly challenged, and where the very nature of existence is open to question. But the existential angst is only half the story. Now let's turn our attention to the theme of environmental disaster. At first glance, the Pokémon world seems like a pristine paradise, filled with lush forests, sparkling rivers, and majestic mountains. But if you look closer, you'll start to see cracks in the facade, hints of pollution, deforestation, and the exploitation of natural resources. The environmental themes are often subtle, but they are undeniably present. Think about the various villainous teams throughout the Pokémon series. Team Rocket, for example, is primarily focused on exploiting Pokémon for profit, but their activities often have devastating consequences for the environment. They pollute rivers, destroy forests, and disrupt ecosystems in their pursuit of rare and powerful Pokémon. Team Aqua and Team Magma from Pokémon Ruby and Sapphire take environmental destruction to a whole new level. Team Aqua wants to flood the world, believing that it will restore the oceans to their former glory. Team Magma, on the other hand, wants to expand the landmass, believing that it will create a better world for humanity. Both teams are driven by misguided ideals, but their actions would have catastrophic consequences for the environment and for all living creatures. And then there's Team Plasma from Pokémon Black and White, who claim to be fighting for Pokémon liberation, but their methods are often violent and destructive. They disrupt the balance of nature, release Pokémon into the wild without regard for their well-being, and ultimately seek to control the world for their own selfish purposes. These villainous teams are not just cartoonish bad guys. They represent real-world threats to the environment, such as pollution, deforestation, and climate change. Their actions serve as a cautionary tale, reminding us of the potential consequences of our own destructive behavior. But the environmental themes in Pokémon go beyond just the actions of villainous teams. Consider the Pokédex entries for certain Pokémon. Many of them describe the devastating impact that Pokémon can have on the environment. Pokémon like Torterra, whose shell is a miniature ecosystem, can inadvertently destroy forests by uprooting trees. Pokémon like Groudon and Kyogre, legendary Pokémon with the power to control the land and sea, can cause massive earthquakes and tsunamis. Even seemingly harmless Pokémon can have a negative impact on the environment. Pokémon like Snorlax, known for their insatiable appetite, can decimate entire fields of crops. Pokémon like Joltik, who drain electricity from power outlets, can overload the power grid and cause blackouts. These examples highlight the delicate balance of nature and the potential for even the smallest disruption to have far-reaching consequences. The games themselves often feature locations that have been affected by environmental damage. Places like the abandoned power plant in Pokémon Red and Blue, or the polluted waters of Canalave City in Pokémon Diamond and Pearl, serve as visual reminders of the potential for ecological collapse. But perhaps the most unsettling environmental theme in Pokémon is the concept of overpopulation. The Pokémon world is teeming with life, but is it sustainable? Are there enough resources to support such a vast and diverse population? The games never explicitly address this issue, but it's a question that lingers in the back of your mind as you explore the world and encounter countless Pokémon. What happens when the Pokémon population outstrips the available resources? Will there be mass starvation? Will Pokémon start fighting each other for survival? Will the environment be irreparably damaged? These are not pleasant questions to consider, but they are important ones. The Pokémon world, despite its cheerful facade, is not immune to the laws of nature. The underlying themes of existential dread and environmental disaster in Pokémon are not always obvious, but they are undeniably present. They add a layer of depth and complexity to the franchise, forcing us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves and the world around us. The Pokémon world is not just a playground for children, it's a reflection of our own society, with all its flaws and contradictions. By exploring these themes, the Pokémon franchise encourages us to think critically about our place in the world and the impact of our actions. It reminds us that even in a world filled with magic and wonder, there are still real-world problems that need to be addressed. It challenges us to be more mindful of our environment, more compassionate towards others, and more aware of the potential consequences of our choices. It's easy to get caught up in the fun and excitement of catching Pokémon and battling trainers, but it's important to remember that there's more to the Pokémon world than meets the eye. Beneath the surface lies a complex and often unsettling reality, one that is filled with existential dread and the threat of environmental disaster. By acknowledging these themes, we can gain a deeper appreciation for the Pokémon franchise and its relevance to our own lives. But this discovery was only the beginning, because next we uncover the unsettling truth about these darker elements might have crept into such a seemingly innocent world. Was it intentional, a reflection of the creator's own anxieties, or something far more sinister? Prepare to have everything you thought you knew about the Pokémon universe challenged as we delve into the hidden agendas and possible conspiracies that might be lurking behind the scenes. If this story resonated with you, there's plenty more. Click the video on screen to keep the journey going, or dive into the full Pokémon playlist for more stories, memories, and deep dives. Whichever path you choose, I'll see you there, trainer.